Welcome, welcome to the Share Parenting Podcast. If you are listening to audio, then you're on Spotify or one of those. And if you would like to see our faces, we are live streaming on Facebook at Share Parenting and on YouTube at Share Parenting. So we would love to see you join us in one of those locations so that we can have a little bit more of a conversation. And if you are seeing our faces, but you prefer to just listen to audio, check out the podcast. So today we have a wonderful guest who's going to talk all about neurodivergence and things we need to know so that we can be there for our kids in the best ways. Please welcome Dorothy Lai, and would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, friends. I'm a parent of a 9-year-old in 3rd grade at public school in Los Angeles and a 7-year-old in 1st grade in public school in Los Angeles. And I work in the PTA with them. So, and I also volunteer on campus. So I see things in the general education classroom on a that level. Anyway, but in the beginning, it started with my son's explosive behavior that was very triggering to my own mental health and regulation at that time. And it was very overwhelming, and I had no answers, and it was very disconcerting. And it was, I tried so I have a history of childhood trauma and all that stuff. And I think it stems from like a very perfectionist family standpoint, which is an autistic trait also. So anyway, but seeing those behaviors in my son, because I know that I had them as a child, I had very explosive behavior too. I just had big feelings, drama queen, dramatic. That's what we get labeled. But seeing my son and knowing, as far as I know, which is pretty much every moment of his life, he doesn't have that substantial trauma. So seeing that he still had that explosive behavior without the catalyst like I did, it made me take a deeper look. And I was a part of the parent education classes at PCC, Pasadena City College. And there's a wonderful teacher that was there, Miss Henry. She is a marriage and family therapist, and she would answer questions for us during our class, as well as teach us a lesson of the day. But she was so insightful and so helpful, and I'm so grateful for that influence during that time, because I just wanted to know all of these things. I had so many very specific questions for her, and it's just so helpful to talk about it with somebody who gets it. So so we were, learning all these like respectful, gentle ways to encourage him to have less meltdowns and stuff like that. It was still happening, and it was really hard to go do things. He doesn't want to attend his baseball, even though he loves baseball. He didn't, it ended up being, it reduced down to what I know now is being perceived, which is a very hard, a hard thing for some autistic folks, is like literally just the feeling of being perceived by other people. So it's so interesting that this is all a common thing that runs in these neurotypes. So in 2nd grade, we finally seeked out an evaluation. We went and found a neuropsychologist that was available. None of those places take insurance. So it was like $3,000 or something like that we had to budget for and pay. And it was over the course of like 7 appointments. And at one of them, so our flavor of autism is very high masking. And so we identify as autistic with ADHD, which is a whole different level of a whole other thing of just autistic or just ADHD. It's extra neurospicy. And then on top of that, out of another level, which is the profile of PDA, pathological demand avoidance or persistent drive for autonomy. And that can translate to a lot of things. Like demands include literal demands like go brush your teeth, to the perceived demand of like the grandparents are coming over and they're going to expect you to talk to them. So you're going to feel this demand and want to go run and hide and not see them. To the demand of your own bladder making you go to the restroom, and you're going to resist that and have accidents. All of those things are demand avoidance, and all of those things are very common for autistic individuals.
I laugh because my ADHD really likes to ignore my bladder, and then I'm annoyed that I'm being interrupted when I like literally can't hold it any longer.
I remember saying, it's so boring. It's so boring. I have to stop, go to the bathroom, sit there. It was, yeah, anyway, good times.
Yeah, as a kid, I used to have reading material. I need something to read.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, I just always have my phone.
That's funny. That's funny. I think my body has been trained. It just does it quick. Like we wait till the last minute, quick, done.
Yeah, it's a little bit, I feel a little ridiculous, the amount of, I don't want to be bored for any amount of time. I'm working on that.
The brain games that are in here by default are really impressive sometimes. You're like, this is so much gymnastics to just do the thing. Why are, like, can we just do it? Can we just do it? That'd be great.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Anyway,
yes.
Okay, so
with in LA, did the psychologist recognize PDA, or is that something you've recognized?
Oh no, they don't even. So PDA is recognized in the United Kingdom. It is not even.
That's what I thought
in the United States. So getting anyone and it looks like people misdiagnose it as ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, or just being like a mean, naughty kid. And if you track, like if you use Ross Green's collaborative planning or collaborative problem solving, yes, and then his book, The Explosive Child, that was where I got started first, actually. And I mean, that can be applied for schools as well. That's what I'm trying to talk with our
He does a lot of work to try to get schools to comprehend Plan B.
It matters and it works. And it's just like, we're not trying to do dominance. These kids remind us very loudly, dominance is not where it's at. We need to collaborate. We need to talk to them. We need to respect what they have to say because they're actually humans also. Like, what a concept.
Right. And the thing is that these kids are doing the best that they can. In that moment of dysregulation, their nervous system is so overwhelmed that the best they can looks like a meltdown. And it's very hard to shift into that perspective when you see a kid being bad. And for those just listening to audio, there are giant air quotes around that phrase. I don't believe in it. These little kids are not bad kids. They are struggling to exist in a world that doesn't have the time or the patience or the understanding to consider what their body and brain is going through. And for some kids, a neurotypical kid perhaps, they can just kind of comply with that and they adjust and they move through that system without seemingly having as much struggle. And then you have these other kids and it's like, well, why won't you just do it? It's like, they would if they could. Yeah. Do they want to be having a meltdown? No, it is utterly exhausting to their body. It uses all of their reserves. It is awful. And yet their nervous system hit a point where they could no longer hold it together.
That's what it is. We'll have to remember that it's not, behavior is communication. And it's not that these kids are just trying to be naughty. Like they're dysregulated for a reason. You have to go upstream, find out why, head off that reason at the past the next time. That's how you get changed behavior. Yelling at a kid, hitting a kid won't work anytime. You're just furthering the damage. The other thing that really sticks at the front of my mind now, and I see it in almost every interaction that's problematic, is hurt people hurt people. And these people that are teachers and staff and caregivers, doctors, nurses, all these people that are in a position of power have never been treated with respect as a person below them. So they don't even know what that looks like. They can't be that because they don't know what that looks like. So what we need to do is teach everybody regulation skills. Everybody needs regulation skills. We can't expect a kid to be regulated if we're over here yelling at them dysregulated. That's not going to happen. That's not how our brains work. It's not going to work that way. Co-regulation.
Yes, and that's how regulation is learned, through thousands and thousands of experiences of co-regulation. A dysregulated adult cannot help a dysregulated child co-regulate and come back to a place of regulation. And by regulation, the general parlance would call that good behavior, right? Again, with a little bit of air quotes. Whatever that looks like to you, that's a regulated child. At least on the surface. Doesn't always translate because there can be so much overwhelm that a child shuts down and an adult can still call them regulated or good. And really they're completely in freeze. So that's why we use the term regulated, because it's a little bit more precise. And a regulated child, they're in that like they can do stuff. They can answer questions. They can engage.
Well,
They can think, right? Their brain is, all the pieces are working together. They can solve problems. They can strategize. They can discuss issues, and when they can't do those things, that's when they're dysregulated in some form or fashion. And we often have not experienced what it looks like for somebody to come alongside us and co-regulate first before we try to problem solve. So as the parent, we'll want to just be like, okay, but don't do that. Just snap out of it. Just do the thing. They can't, not won't, but can't. And they will be able to once they can get regulated again, obviously depending on the thing. So I think that that's something where a lot of parents are sitting in that moment going, but I don't know what to do then, because they're freaking out and they need to stop freaking out. And co-regulation for a lot of us at some point feels like doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You want to speak to the difference between doing nothing versus what co-regulation really is?
Okay, so doing nothing, I don't think anyone ever does nothing. I think either you get escalated and triggered, or you rein in all your zen, you take that deep breath when you're about to lose it, and you remember that you're trying to break cycles and you're trying to treat this kid with respect because they deserve respect, imagine. So I say, I hear you all the time. That is probably my most used phrase is, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. Take a deep breath. We got this. Like we have a trampoline in our living room that we use very regularly. Like these are things to exercise the big feelings. I'm okay with yelling and screaming in our house. We put music on loud very often. Like we're autistic with ADHD. We are intense brains, and that requires a lot of stimulus. Like I know that if my two kids are sitting with each other, eating a meal, having a little lunch together, if I don't put on an audiobook or some music that will pique their brains, they will immediately start fighting. They'll just be fighting the whole time. It happens 100% of the time. And I know that. So I put on music. Here's your lunch. Here's your music. And that keeps the peace. We also do a lot of screen time for regulation. Our kids have very intense needs for stimulus. And there's a lot of quality content on there. There's a lot of bad content, so we definitely don't watch everything. Like they don't have free reign on YouTube or anything like that. They know that they can watch PBS Kids. They know they can watch kids Netflix and Disney, and that's like in that they find some really good stuff. And I'm not gonna lie that I really vouch for a lot of quality content for youth now, as long as they're getting stimulus otherwise, and you're still interacting with your child.
Well, and see, you just hit the most important thing. There's a lot of argument about screens. I get it. And it's interesting to listen to kind of a conversation play out when you're on the outside of it, because you'll find a lot of times that both people are right? Screens are overstimulating. Cool. That's true for your
kid.
Screens are the only thing that can help my kid regulate after a hard day at school. Cool. That's true for your kids. You're not either one of you wrong.
Yes.
The problem with screens is if they are too overstimulating for your particular child, then obviously you're observing that and you're noticing that, and you need to maybe do something different in your home. Great. You have the parental authority to do that in your home, and you can use that wisdom judiciously for the best outcome for your children. My children absolutely can have too much screen time. It depends on the type of screen time, depends on what it is. Certain things, for whatever reason, have been banned because they almost instantly fry their brains.
Yes.
PJ Masks, for some reason, is a show that would send both of my boys off the deep end.
What was it?
PJ Masks. It's a kid's cartoon. There's nothing really wrong with it. I don't understand why.
That's funny.
But
you know what we would do? We would put on the soundtrack, and then they would put on their capes, and they would run laps for probably an hour. Run laps in our house in an infinity pattern for an hour, playing the Owlette song over and 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 over.
They got the big like hideout whatever that plays the song, so they will do that, and they've got the capes and they got the masks, and so they could play PJ Masks just fine, but the show itself, they couldn't just sit and watch their TV time on that show. And so we get to make those choices in our home with respect to our specific children. If your kids are getting no time outside, they're probably going to struggle even more. Outside is for most children a necessity. There might be some sensory needs that you have to accommodate for, depending on the child. That could probably be a whole episode. But outside is really, really, really valuable to the sensory system, to regulation, to fresh air, to exercise, to all of those things. You want to make sure you're actually still spending one-on-one quality time with your child. TV can't replace that. So if that's still happening, you don't have a problem. You want to make sure that they're still being exposed to words and literature, like actual printed words around their environment. Print-rich environment is what we call it in education.
Yes.
And
we use closed captioning all the time, too.
That is one way to do that, right?
Captioning is a little lesser.
Yes. Part of my ADHD is I have a very hard time unless I can also see the words. Yeah. So if it's both, then I can hear it just fine. And if there isn't captions, I find it really hard to process the words. And I'm like, what did they say? I don't understand.
It's something else all the time.
Yeah.
It's quite comical, but it's every day of my life.
Yeah. And so there's these pieces that I don't think screens are ever going to fall into an all bad or all good category. I think that you use your discernment for your children, and then you also make sure that all these other beautiful things about life are included in their day-to-day. And you look at your situation. Do we have a problem? If not, then we don't have a problem.
Yes.
If this is working for our family, then it's working, and that's great.
So
I think it's really valuable what you just said.
The word autism means alone, and I think that's a really good place to start in understanding it. That
I didn't know that.
Yes, if you break apart the word, which I love to do.
Yeah.
So it just means that everyone is different. Like even two autistic folks are going to be totally different. Yeah. My son and I, and my dad and my parents actually have like very similar traits along the way, which I find so interesting. I find it so interesting. Like everybody bursts into song all the time, every day, right? That's not what everyone does. Oh, okay. But yeah, so that's just.
I do though.
Yeah. See,
like comically so. It's very regulating for me.
Yes.
It's something I learned when I first wanted to stop yelling years and years and years and years and years ago. That was one thing that I found was very helpful for me was I would start to yell and then I'd be like, no, I'm going to sing it instead. And it was so silly that it just gave my brain permission to like release some of that tension and angst and frustration that I was feeling.
Yes. And that's such a good switch. Such a good switch. And you probably started doing it automatically.
Mm-hmm. And my kids laughed and then everybody was laughing and it was good.
Humor is a huge tactic that we use to, especially like when encouraging them to do something that's not a preferred activity or like de-escalating moments is humor. Like luckily I'm hilarious, but it's definitely a really effective tool, especially for PDA.
I was just going to say that. I think that without humor, PDA would just be unmanageable. Yeah. It's one of the safest ways to approach conversation with that particular child because they're already kind of on guard. They've got this threat detection system that is
really sensitive nervous system, like you said.
And so there's even in a moment of like, we're starting to dysregulate and he'll say something really extreme, you know, something with like an always or a never or every time or something like that.
Yeah.
And I can go, oh, always, every second of every day. And he's like, oh, okay, not always. And like, that's a huge progress for him to be able to feel really intensely, which that's all language is. It's just it's describing the intensity of the feeling, right? That's why he's using those extreme words. It's not because he actually thinks that we never do anything for him. It's that he's feeling this intensity and he needs to demonstrate that with words. And I'm not arguing with him. I think that's really important to be clear. I have no investment in convincing him he's wrong. First of all, I'll fail. Second of all, what is actually the point? My investment is in seeing if there is any logic left in that forward-thinking brain. And if there is, if I can do that with humor, he laughs, he comes back online a little bit more, and then we can have a conversation. Because from that place of like, oh, always, every single second of every day, he's like, oh, no, right? Now he's coming back down into his body. There's a little bit of logic. And then I can say, but it does sound really frustrating. I think that's what I'm hearing. And he's like, yes, it's so frustrating. Because every time, okay, well, not every time, but when it does happen, and it is a lot, fair man, it is a lot. It's too much. That's too much. I hear you.
Mhm.
Like you said, right? And then now we're on the same side, right? Now we've
Us
come
against the
together.
problem instead of us against each other.
Every day of my life, I use that phrase. Like, it is us versus whatever the thing is. It's
Mhm.
that way with me and my husband. It's that way with me and my kids. It's that way with the Bell family versus life in general. It's like, what is the issue? How are we going to approach this issue so that we're on the same team here?
Yeah, that's the
We
best.
have shared goals.
Yeah.
And if we don't, why don't we? You know, what is your goal? That's something I ask my kids a lot. What is your goal? Or if that's too abstract of a question, depending on the kid's age and development, I might say, you know, what were you hoping happened
Hmm.
right there? Because they have reasons for what they're doing. And when you ask a kid why, it's a very abstract question. And a lot of kids don't know how to answer that. And for a PDA kid, that can feel like a demand.
Mhm.
And if I ask what, there's usually a better answer that pops into their brain. My son described it as, it's like a quiz, which is not going to land well with every PDA kid or even most. But for whatever reason, that was intriguing to him. He's like, it's like a quiz. And I know the answer. Pop quiz. And I'm like, shocked at that response, but okay.
Yes, man.
It's amazing. But if I didn't take the time to really try to understand his brain and work with his, you know, particularities, then I would never know that.
Yes.
You know, and so he's gotten very good at helping me to work with the brain that he has and like sharing his
Oh,
experience with
good.
me.
That's the goal. That is the goal. And that's like what I work on now, and what I'm trying to build for us in society is support. Is like, what do we how like know about yourself so that you can stop like giving yourself a hard time for not being this perfect person, first of
Right.
all, whatever that means, which is not even existing, you know?
Exactly.
I spend so much time reminding myself and others that we're human. We're animals. We're disgusting. We have big feelings. Every single one of us poops, you know, like we're human, despite what all of the society tells you, you know, despite all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't get away from that part, and we have big feelings, and we're all different, and that's part of it. So
Yeah.
but once we get over that, and then part of being human means also that, you know, other species don't subjugate children and, you know, elders and have social hierarchies and stuff. So let's move away from that, more to like loving, caring for community. Like, that's what we're supposed to do as animals. Anyways, a little bit of a tangent there, but it's just like get to know your kid, get to know your own brain.
Yeah.
And so it's nature and nurture. You understand what you're born with and how your brain structure works, and then you fit in all the accommodations there. There's tools for everything. You have to try everything until you find something that works for you. Like, nobody can be like, oh, do this and this medication. Even that medications don't apply
In every single body.
it's different. And so let's think about that applied to how we take care of our kids, is understanding and applying those very specific accommodations. And that can be at home and at school. The other thing I think about is I look at my dog and I think about how he cannot do any of his commands when he's like a wild little animal, because he's a little puppy right now still. So like when he's got the zoomies, or when someone comes over and his whole tail's flapping all over the place, like he can't access his tricks that he knows.
Yeah.
So you have to do a centering, you have to focus, you have to bring it in. I do this a lot to my kids, to like focus myself, like right, like you know, Autism Level Up has really good tools.
Nice.
All of this stuff, and it has to do with energy meter, because that's a lot of times what we struggle with, is having appropriate energy for the activity that we're doing. Yeah. So they have a whole concept to rein that in, to focus. But yeah, so then when my dog is able to focus, when he is able to get there, then he's able to get into the mindset to be able to respond to the commands.
Yeah.
I just see that, and then I'm like,
yeah. And I find that it's very interesting how hard it is for adults to apply the same rationale to adults and to children. So
Yes.
now, children are not small adults. They are in their own stage of development. Their brains are not completely developed, and we cannot expect them to just act like little adults. So it does not work in reverse. What I mean, though, is that if you're at the bank and the person in front of you is arguing with the teller and they're like, that's crazy. I know I had the money in there and you're telling me there's nothing there. Who did this? There is a mistake. I need to talk to your manager. Nobody is going to tell that person, you need to fix your tone. Fix
Yeah,
your
exactly.
What
Yeah.
are you doing? They're
Yeah.
going to go, ooh, that sucks.
I know.
Then there, right? Almost exclusively, people react with some level of tolerance or empathy for adults having a hard time. And there's limits.
Yeah.
There's a level at which we're like, hey, dude, yeah, no. But just the level of upset that most kids would go through if they're facing a difficult thing, something that is disappointing, not what they expected, something they can't control, same stuff that upsets us. But then we look at kids in that situation and we're like, that kid's bad. Fix him. Control him.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
This is human experience. This is real life. Things are disappointing. And how you learn to deal with disappointment is by feeling disappointed.
Yes.
With a safe person who can go, yeah, I've been there. This sucks a lot. Yeah. And it's big and it's big and it's big and it's going to stay big until it starts to get small. And I'll sit with you until we get there. And the more that we do this and we allow them to experience the feelings and then to come out the other side of it, the more their brain develops those neural connections and the more faith they believe in themselves that they can tolerate those feelings. And I think that as a society, it's very uncomfortable when a kid starts having feelings in front of you.
Yeah, because no space was ever held for them.
Exactly. We don't know what it's like to be a little kid who's actually allowed to feel things. So our brain, our inner child is going, bad, shut it down, quick. They're going to get in trouble. Stop. It's a protection, but it comes out as a control, which is just another threat to that kid, which adds more stress to the nervous system. Yeah. And so even whether you have kids in that stage or not, you can still be part of creating that safe environment of, yeah, it's hard to feel that way. It's hard to feel disappointed. It's hard to lose. It's hard to, want something and kind of have a picture in your mind of what it's going to be. And then whoop, that's not there anymore. That is a hard human experience. And you're learning how to feel that. And man, I'm with you in that.
Yeah. And so for people who haven't had that experience, it helps to use sentence frames. Like, that's one of the things that I would ideally like to create is, especially as a visual learner, like if you can remember these phrases to get started to like stop the trigger in yourself, actually you'll have to handle that in therapy to stop that trigger. But like you reframe that right away, get instead of defensive mode, you're into trying to help, and being able to be that support.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is.
What are some of your favorite reframes that you use?
Not like one is can't not won't, like you said, and there's a whole new book about that, about PDA, called Can't Not Won't.
Love it.
Yeah, it's really good. And then there's I think just the Ross Green, like they're doing as best as they can with what they have right now. Like they are doing their best. Kids try their best, they do. And if they're not, then there's a reason why, and we should talk about it and we should delve into that.
Right. And I think that's what's so tricky is parents will tell me, they're like, okay, but they could put their socks on, 2 weeks ago, just fine. And it's like, okay, well, 2 weeks ago was a different day, a different sleep level, different blood sugar level, different connection level, different temperature in the weather. Like there's a lot of things that we don't always think about that can add just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until they're like, I can't do it.
Yeah. And they need to think about themselves too. Like, do you have idiosyncrasies? Absolutely.
Right.
So do they. Respect it both ways.
And I think that we have a lot of fear when it comes to parenting. And when we're parenting from fear, we're usually not making the best choices. And if you're afraid that, if I put my 6-year-old socks on, they'll never be independent, like that's a huge leap. That never is a huge indicator that you're in fear. Because what you're saying essentially is that if you put your child's socks on, they will never, for the rest of their life, learn, grow, develop, like achieve anything. They're going to be exactly 6, even when they're 50.
Yeah.
And I know that nobody actually believes that, barring a significant type of diagnosis where certain medical conditions, they actually can't develop. But if you have a child who is developing and learning those skills, and they could do it 2 weeks ago, probably just put their socks on.
Yeah.
They're telling you either, I feel close to you when you do things for me. It makes me feel special. It makes me feel connected. It may well be your energy is a lot right now. Slow down. Come sit with me. They just don't want to say that. That was my kid. They didn't want me to put his shoes on because I would be frantic in the morning trying to be on time because ADHD, always late, time blindness, very hard time with that skill set. And that was his way. He was 2 years old and he'd be like, you choose. I'm like, just put your shoes on. He's like, you shoes. And he'd just sit there. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Son, that's one of his, that he likes me to help him with his socks in the morning. And he can do it. He can. And I don't even argue with about it because I understand that is a moment he wants connection. Like he's asking very clearly, and can I give him 2 minutes to help him with the socks? Yes, I can.
Yeah. And you get to frame it that way. I will give you 2 minutes of my energy and time.
Yes, that's how I see for my PDA, because I identify as PDA also. I have to change. I have to like get in the front of it and be like, we're gonna do it instead of I have to do it.
Yes. That's something that worked really, really well for me is switching from a have to or should to I choose to, because I feel like I get my power back. I choose to go sing you your songs for bedtime, not, oh, I have to do this. Because then that breeds resentment. Yeah. And I think that when I'm talking with parents who are really frustrated with their kids, that's one of the steps that we have to take is to help them to identify what is your priority as a parent. Now, what choices align with that value? So those are yours now. This isn't your kid making you anything. You are choosing because you align with respectful values or empowerment or whatever the thing is. You're choosing then to take these actions because that's the parent that you are. And that identity piece is very helpful in overcoming some of those frustrations and resentments. And letting go of other people's shoulds. It's like, oh, well, he should be doing it himself. And he can, and he does. And right now he doesn't want to. And I choose to kneel down and take 2 minutes with him.
Yeah. Yes.
So
one therapist phrased it, you shouldn't should on yourself. Don't should on yourself.
Yeah.
I like that one.
I did a class a while back called Shed the Shoulds.
Shed the Shoulds. I like that. It's a good one because I didn't realize how much I had internalized. Mm-hmm. That is really subjective. And it was very problematic for my mental health. Like I had to reach burnout before I was able to learn about myself. Yeah. Like and
I think you were saying that that's part of the challenge of being a neurodivergent child who doesn't know they're neurodivergent in childhood.
Yeah. And I think I work so hard. Like I want people to know about themselves. I want you to know. And it's not a bad thing. It's just different. It's literally just different. Your brain works this way. And if you keep trying to put it through this other operating system, you're going to get bad data. It's going to not come out right. You know? Like, it's going to be a struggle.
Well, the U in Sure Parenting has always stood for unique because I believe we each have a unique brain. Mm-hmm. And whether there is a diagnostic label for that or not, you have to know you. You have to learn what works for you and what doesn't work for you and maybe why, because some things that don't work for you could, but there's something else blocking it. Yeah. Or it really just doesn't work for you. Yeah. And you get to explore that. And the more that you are kind and accepting and gentle of yourself, the more likely you're going to be to find your path to that goal, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And I think that, I also had the perfectionist tendencies. I had a very fixed mindset for a very long time and really, really operated from an exclusive place of should, making other people happy and doing what I should do. And being able to, I don't know if I hit burnout or what, but there was a point where I was like, yeah, that's not going to work anymore. And it was unfortunately accompanied by a lot of resentment and frustration and anger and big feelings. And my path through that was, okay, well, if I eliminate the should, what is in there that allowed me to align with that should anyway? Who says? It's a question I ask a lot. Whenever I should, I'm like, okay, but says who? Right? Sometimes there's valid things.
Yeah. Right?
And sometimes the answer is, yeah, I just don't agree with that. Yeah. And I'm my own person and I can do that. Yeah. And I want my kids to be able to do that, especially given their unique brains. I want them to be able to look at things and go, well, yeah, it makes sense to. I remember my kid being like, okay, but why do I have to wear clothes? Like, and the answer of, well, you're just supposed to in public, it didn't work, was not satisfying enough. And the answer really is that as a society, we have agreed to cover private parts.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps people a little cleaner. It makes everybody feel safer. And we've all agreed to that. And there's certain things that we just do as a society, and we've all agreed to it. And so there's rules and laws in place to uphold those societal agreements. Fine. I'm like, yeah, you don't have to like it. And
Tell him to be a nudist activist when he grows up.
Quite possibly, but like, and he was all of 3. So he just was, he just really wanted to be nude all the time. And it was fine at home. And it was like, I don't care. You can run around naked. But when we're going to, a play group, nobody else has agreed to see your genitals, sir. Private parts.
Yeah.
To show them to people. They say no.
To consent.
Yeah. And so, it's just an interesting thing to watch how naturally they question shoulds.
Yeah.
And I really was inspired by that in them, that they will question things. My oldest is famous for going, is that a problem?
That's what some say is our evolutionary purpose, is to challenge the status quo and to build us better.
I love it. I think it's amazing.
I mean, we definitely do that.
So in the work that you're doing, how can we support it or support you? Is it making it more known? Is it
understanding our own kids? I think it's really hard still, because there's like the diagnostic criteria is so far behind what we actually know about autism from actually autistic folks.
Yeah.
And the research has been done on white males historically, and that's what we're working off of. That's why everyone's like, oh, you don't look autistic. Yeah. I didn't, they wouldn't give me my autism card because I'm not a white male. So
yeah.
Anyway, which is not a thing, by the way, for those that need clarification. So it's about understanding yourself. It's about giving yourself the space to live your best life. That's what I really find as my goal, is for everyone to just live their best life. Like knowing how your brain works, knowing how your emotions work, knowing the things that are hard for you and the things that you excel at, and being able to accommodate for all of those things, being able to grow in your area of interest, in your area, that feeds you, because that's how our brain works. We get fed by our interests, and like that's where all of our learning comes from. You can learn about anything through the lens of someone's special interest.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love it. And I think that one of the coolest parts about being alive today is that there are these niches that we can dive down into and just make it better from the inside out.
We're really, I feel like we're really at the front of a neurodiversity movement, because there's so much more happening. We're understanding what different people look like as neurodivergent, and understanding how insidious it is, the problems that we have, squishing everybody into these narrow boxes that don't serve us. We need to come up with better accommodations for kids and families in school and in the workplace and in the laws, because something else I've learned on this journey is, so the neurodivergent population is said to be 15%, and it's supposed to be 50% of the prison population. Like the school to prison, the school to prison pipeline is of neurodivergent kids. We need to be understanding. We need to be accommodating. We need to be identifying these kids for themselves, not to like put them in classes or anything. My kid is in a mainstream classroom. Like we need, and it also breaks my heart thinking about the kids that don't have access to a diagnosis, which is another huge problem. One, because someone like me probably wouldn't get a diagnosis. I 100% am ADHD, but I'm internalized presentation. I'm high masking PDA. It's a lot of different things. It's hard. It's hard. Yeah. And like these kids in the classroom, they have behaviors that are very neurodivergent, very obviously neurodivergent, and they just get punished for them. And that's what happened to all of us in school. And now we all have anxiety and depression. It's all connected. It's all together. We have to intervene young. We have to know about our kids young. We have to help them. We have to advocate for them.
Yeah. And
Don't
help them find their tools and strategies. I have this visual of this toolbox, and when if your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail is the saying. And it's like, okay, well then we need more tools.
Yeah.
And they can be small tools. Like I remember coping with my ADHD in school. I always had some kind of candy on my desk to suck on for dopamine because I couldn't not, like always. I'd go through a pack a day of gum in high school, like an actual full pack of wintergreen gum. I'd just chew it, and as soon as I lost flavor, I'd chew another piece.
Relatable, girl. You're talking to the right people. That's me too.
And like sensory anxiety plus the sugar and the dopamine.
Yeah.
It was necessary at all. And then I also did a lot of like doodling or drawing or coloring or just things that were presumably not focusing. But I had the benefit of a high IQ that I could compensate for a lot of it. Like I would get A's.
Get trouble for the rest of it.
Yeah, it was like, well, yeah, she's not paying attention, but like somehow she's still, because that's how I pay attention. And I do it to this day. Yes. That is how I pay attention. And so when my kids, I homeschool them.
I've been fidgeting with this whole time. This is one of my favorites.
I've been picking at my nails, which is the least of us.
That's another thing I see on campus. I see kids. I noticed it with my own kid. I was like, oh my gosh, your freaking fingernail's infected from picking it. And then I started noticing other kids in classes, like when I'm doing an art project with them, their fingers recovering from an infection from picking it so much. Or that I chew on the inside of my cheeks.
I do that.
My toes, my nails are going all the time. All of that stuff, that's internalized.
Yeah. And a lot of my presentation is, and it's largely in my head, like in my head, as in my thoughts are racing and there's forever streams of thought happening.
Rich inner world.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's very wild. And so, I had these ways of sort of making do, but it would have been so helpful to know why I was doing that or what I was even doing, and maybe have other tools, other options that I could utilize that were maybe a little bit more productive, because the sugar thing and then the caffeine thing went hard for a while. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know I was medicating myself.
Yeah.
And my body eventually really did not like those strategies. But as a teenager, I didn't care.
Yeah.
Just like, this is how I survive.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been cool to know then, oh, this is the brain type you're dealing with. So here's all kinds of things you can try and start to learn for yourself what works for you at, 10 rather than at 32, I think I was when I got diagnosed.
And also not hear about it. I think it's also important to not only have it described as a disorder. Autism also like, yes, it's a disability because of a number of different reasons, depending on the person. But it's like the fact that it's only the parts that can be charged to insurance are what's listed in the DSM. Like the DSM is directly tied to billing for insurance.
Oh yeah, for sure. That was the thing with mine.
That's why I don't exist on there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's hard because it's like, okay, so the DSM is helpful in some ways. It can get you services, it can get you tools, but it's also seen sort of almost biblically, and it needs to be not the only thing that is listened to and talked about. And I've noticed that too when I talk to autistic individuals. Like, it's fascinating the breadth of knowledge that they can share that I can't read in a DSM. I can't even, learn from.
I don't think it's all internalized. That's why it's hard to describe. I've always known that it's like a busy, chaotic tornado inside of my brain, but I didn't know what that was. So I would just shut it all down and ignore it and suppress it. And then
I just felt anxiety, I think, for so long. And I've had anxiety and panic attacks for a long time.
A huge one for us.
But I think that I didn't realize there was more to it than that.
Yeah.
And then
we're good at pattern recognizing. So we can, like, we know everything that's happening in a room, and then we're like worrying about it also. And not even in a room. It's also everything that's happened in life. It's everything that we've ever experienced. It's every embarrassing moment ever that we would like to replay at 2:00 in the morning. It's all of these things. The brain doesn't quit. It doesn't quit. There's never a dull moment.
Mm-hmm. And so when I know if my kid is dealing with something even remotely like what I'm dealing with, before they're able to articulate it, I know, like, okay, you're having a hard time focusing on this. How can we add some dopamine? How can we add some stimulation? Or sometimes how can we take away stimulation?
Mm-hmm.
If your kids need a lot of, stimulation to be able to focus on a meal, some kids need the opposite. They need to turn off the TV, put on even noise canceling headphones so they can just focus on one thing.
Yeah.
That's fair too. Every brain is different. That's my new jingle. And it's really incredible when kids learn some tools and they're like, I can help myself. Like, I have things I can do. It's so empowering.
And I give my son sentence frames to take to school sometimes when he's having a lot of anxiety about something at school. And he's like, well, what if blah, blah, blah? I'm like, honey, if that happens, you say blah, blah, blah. Let's practice it together. Say blah, blah, blah. You try blah, blah, blah. And then he feels better about it, but it's not innate. He would have spent his entire day making himself sick with worry about that. But it's giving him
that explicit instruction can be so helpful to some of these kids
and empowering him. He knows that I'm on his side against this with him.
Yeah. It's like, hey, I believe you and I believe in you. That's a phrase I use all the time too.
Yes.
I believe you and I believe in you.
You can do hard things.
Yep.
I believe in you. You got this.
It's hard. I believe you. It is hard.
Literally about the clash yesterday. I believe in you. You got this.
Yeah. So I think this conversation can go on possibly forever because I don't think we'll ever reach the end of
we're ADHD. We could go on forever.
But I do have an appointment to take my son to. So I am going to do that. And I would love to if you do create these sentence frames, I would love to have you back on to share them with us. And like, whether, I don't know if you're selling them or doing a subscription thing or how you want to do that.
Resources out. I'm creating free resources. So
love that. So do you have a website already or are you?
It's literally just me over here creating all of this because this is what I would have wanted to have when my son was diagnosed a year ago. It's only been a year.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But this is what I need like deep dives down my special interest, which is the sociology, psychology, and neurodivergence. So
we are friends instantly. Okay. So you keep me in the loop on how it's developing. If I can help you, if you want to maybe guest post on my blog or anything like that, so that you can kind of start to bring people into what you're creating. And we'll have you back on to share your sentence frames when they're ready.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sound good?
Yummy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming and talking about this. It's such an important discussion.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.